Okay, so, dramatic intro aside, corruption in Venezuela is a pretty serious issue. The level of corruption usually depended on the person in power, extending back at least to its independence in 1821. Simon Bolivar issued 3 decrees between 1813 and 1826. In these decrees, he defined corruption as the violation of public interest. In 1948, the Acción Democrática was overthrown by the very people who conducted the coup 3 years earlier, which had put Acción Democrática in power in the first place. This new regime, ran by Marcos Pérez Jiménez over the next 10 years, kept corruption to an inner circle, mostly through commissions obtained from contracting at public works. However, this did have a positive effect by providing a boost to Venezuelans' aging infrastructure. But those benefiting most were limited to the president himself, immediate collaborators, and extended family. 1958 marked the beginning of nearly 50 years of democratically elected officials and, for a brief time, transparency and growth of the middle class. The mid-70s was marked by a rapid increase in oil prices, which more than tripled Venezuela's oil income. This proved too tempting for greedy officials. 1975 onward marked increasing levels of corruption. This was mainly due to the rapid increase in public works funds under the program known as the Great Venezuela, put forth by President Perez. The Venezuelan General Comptroller during the Luis Herrera presidency of 1979 to 1984 would describe the administration as a system totally out of control. Meet Hugo Chavez. In 1998, the December elections would bring presidential candidates Hugo Chavez and Enrique Salas Romero, with Chavez running under a campaign of writing a new constitution, eliminating government corruption, and fighting against social exclusion and poverty. This third point, in particular, really hit home. With 60% of the country in poverty and 30% in extreme poverty, these were decisive factors in his victory. But first, Chavez focused on his political revolution. From his first moments in power, he started dismantling the government, starting with Congress, Supreme Court of Justice, and the Electoral Council. These were then staffed with followers of Chavez. In the time Chavez ruled, incidents, number of cases of corruption, and intensity, amounts of money and resources involved, were the worst in Venezuelan history. For the first time, corruption spread from the upper elites to the masses of followers under his regime in the form of government handouts. This new corrupt social class feeding from Chavez's hand was set to replace the traditional middle class and spread to 4 main areas of corruption. Miraflores is the presidential headquarters where Hugo Chavez exercises power unconstitutionally, where people operate on bribes before anything else, and large sums of cash are handled casually. An example illustrated by journalist Nelson Bacaranda as follows. In October 2010, Cuban bodyguards were sent to the central bank to get $5 million in cash for a Chavez trip abroad. However, this money never made it to Miraflores, located only 2 blocks away. Of course, with the massive influx of oil profits, an estimated $300 billion between 1999 and 2006, Petróleos de Venezuela, or the PDVSA, grew at an exponential rate. Corruption here is granted mainly through no-bid contracts to friends of the regime. An example of this is Luis Vierma, the Vice President for Exploration and Production, who recently admitted to giving a no-bid oil contract for $20 million to a company with only 3 employees and no rigs. All of this mismanagement has led to a decline of some 800,000 barrels per day over the last decade. Next is the Defense Ministry and National Guard. In a report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, corruption had reached the ministerial levels of government within the Venezuelan National Guard, including clear links established between the Venezuelan military and FARC, proven by contents of laptops belonging to deceased FARC leader Raul Reyes. Wikipedia cites the operations of FARC are funded by ransom and kidnapping, gold mining, and illegal drug distribution, and is considered a terrorist operation by the Colombian government. Finally, the last hotbed of corruption is the Ministry of Finance. Being at the heart of money handling within the country, this institution was rampant with misuse over national funds, dual exchange rates, parallel funds, and no oversight over laws and regulations of any type, festering corruption to an all-time high and led to many bankers becoming overnight millionaires. The levels of corruption can be broken down into 3 categories: grand corruption made from major policy decisions by Chavez, bureaucratic corruption at the level of government bureaucracy, and systemic corruption, which is the interface between government and the private sector. To put some of this money in perspective, let's start with President Jaime Lucinchi, who ruled from 1984 to 1994. Some $36 billion was pilfered or stolen, mainly through a corrupt exchange control program. In 1997, the Caracas-based organization Pro Calidad de Vida estimated some $100 billion in oil income had been wasted or stolen during the last 25 years. During Hugo Chavez's rule, an estimated $300 billion of oil income entered the national treasury. Total income, including tax revenue, is an estimated $700 billion. This money is nowhere to be seen in Venezuela's public works or effective health and education programs. During this time, national debt increased from $22 billion to about $70 billion. $22.5 billion in transfers have been made to foreign accounts, which maintains the Venezuelan central bank, where at least half of which is unaccounted for. Jose Guerra, a former central bank exec, indicates it had been used by Chavez to buy political loyalties in the region. All of these are, of course, estimates due to the poor transparency and total mismanagement of funds within the government. So, a lot of money is moving around. Few people know where it is, very few control it, and certainly the majority, the Venezuelan people, will never see it. Hugo Chavez is out and a new president, Nicolas Maduro, is in charge. So what's being done now? In short, not much. President Maduro has requested to rule by decree, a move usually reserved for crisis and one Chavez had used to rewrite the laws as he saw fit to supposedly fight corruption with. To quote, "If necessary, I'm ready to change all the laws." Again, like Chavez, Maduro ran under a heavy anti-corruption campaign in which a few people were even arrested. But Eliver Solano, an officer at the Venezuelan National Intelligence Agency, has said, "We investigate government corruption, but I have never been asked to look into anyone who is in favor of the Chavismo socialist. We are only ever instructed to investigate government opponents. We are used to bring down socialist opposition rather than tackle corruption in earnest." Perhaps Maduro's political opponent sums it up best. This is probably the only government on the planet that attacks the opposition for being corrupt, when corruption is with those who exercise power, adding that if Maduro turned investigators loose on the people around him, we would be left without a government. Which begs the question, with the level of corruption so rampant and deep within, do the Venezuelan people really have a government as it is now?